p.m. Thank you for watching. That's it from me on Business Morning. I hand things over to the Sunrise Daily team.
Well, what we're discussing next is very closely related to business and still the aftermath of Detty December. Sadly, not all of it was very positive. While, it has been largely praised as something that we should look forward to and, try and plan ahead for. I think it was the former governor of Lagos State, Mr. Babatunde Fashola, SAN, who had spoken recently at a convocation event in Lagos, where he said that Nigeria was said to have gotten about 4% of its GDP in December alone in activities, commercial and economic activities around December. Just in case you're wondering, some people have put that at about $8 billion. Well, I think that, it's still left for the MBS or whoever else to certify those numbers to us. But if we're looking at such substantial numbers, what are the drawbacks, if any? There's some people have started reporting that, some people went back to their base abroad and then they started asking their banks not to honor some commitments and financial payments which they had made, and saying that they had no knowledge of those payments as such. How can we, mitigate this sort of drawbacks? We don't know how widespread they are. We're unable to measure for now, just how widespread that sort of practice is. But if it is widespread, or even if it was just a small fraction, this certainly will impact the businesses that are affected, especially if businesses were conducted with them. And Nigeria being known, we're still fighting that image in the media as not being the headquarters of online-based scams. It is very likely that we will be holding the short end of the stick. But what can we do to mitigate some of these, drawbacks that could come as a result of Detty December and its associated spendings? Joining us right now to discuss this is Mr. Richard Ejiofor, who is the CEO of Mr. Rule Group in the United Kingdom, is a HR specialist and also a former bank card business manager. He's currently a student in the United Kingdom. Mr. Ejiofor, thank you so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much, Mupe, and the rest of the team there. Just a quick correction. I'm not a student at the moment. I'm a UK student recruitment consultant.
Oh, apologies. I did not read it in full. Apologies for that. But, we're all learning, aren't we? Let me quickly ask you, this Detty December, what was your reading of it? Because we've gone in and on about it. We even understand it's finally made its way into Wikipedia. It's now getting into mainstream. Before you know what's happening, it might even be in the dictionary. You never can tell. So what was your reading of this term now that seems to have come to stay?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me into this to discuss this. The Detty December itself is something that ordinarily I thought should be associated with celebration, because December is for Christmas celebration. But the current happening is becoming a disturbing, because I read the statistics from the Lagos State consultant, the statistics from the tax and the revenue, the transactions that happen in Lagos, and I begin to read the trending and news about the Detty December, which appear to now the name Detty December now seems to be correlated with a fraud and not the original celebration which December was supposed to be for.
Well, that's certainly very, very disturbing. I mean, what we're now beginning to hear about how, some people are getting back home and saying, and denying some transactions that they, consummated here in Nigeria, and businesses now holding the short end of the stick as a result of that. Some businesses even saying, they're about to go under as a result of this. Is there anything that could have been done, any safeguards that Nigerian businesses need to put in place? Because we understand that part of the challenges for those who came home, I remember reading a Nairametrics, let's say, article on the drawbacks. You know, there are advantages and what we need to do, but then the drawbacks were around transactions, how cards that were brought home from abroad were not compatible with the systems that we had here, and how some of them had to, you know, withdraw dollars somewhere, you know, change in another place. And the transactions were not really easy peasy, so to speak, unless they were able to get Nigerian cards. So do you think that at the end that could be an advantage rather than a disadvantage?
Well, definitely, when you look at it for the standpoint of tourism, that is definitely a disadvantage for Nigeria, because most country today, they strive on the revenue they generate from tourism. And if that is happening, then it is not really an advantage for Nigeria, because it paints a bad image of a carded transaction, especially for foreign card coming to the country to do transactions. But let me quickly take you through, because I understand what is going on, and I want to quickly take us through the term chargeback. Chargeback, because that is where it eventually ends, when a card holder goes to a card issuing a financial institution to say, a transaction which has appeared on my account, I do not recognize this transaction. This transaction was not initiated or consummated by me. That is a chargeback in itself. But let me quickly take us through the process of chargeback, and then we look at who eventually pays the chargeback and some mitigation that can be put in place to avert this occurrence. Because sincerely, I sympathize with businesses, especially small businesses in Nigeria, that may have been affected with this by this Detty December. For chargeback to be processed, the card holder has to go to the issuing bank, to dispute a transaction. When they dispute that transaction, they have to support it with evidence, maybe like a receipt or email to say they have not done this transaction. Then the issuing bank, which is that card holder's bank, will have to review the transaction. When they review the transaction, then they will use. I don't know if the Nigeria bank have this provision, but a country like the UK has that provision where they have to make a provisional credit for you while the investigation is going on. They made that provisional credit just in form of to cushion the pain, the financial pain that you'll be going through at that particular time. When that provisional credit has been made available to the card holder, then the issuing bank will now communicate with the merchant bank. The merchant bank in this instance now, Nigeria, is a bank in Nigeria where that particular client, that merchant, that particular, for instance, a hotel where the card was used, the bank of that hotel is the merchant bank. They will contact the merchant bank, and when they contact the merchant bank in itself will now contact the merchant. The onus is now on the merchant to prove that this transaction happened. It is more difficult when the transaction is what we call in a card processing, not card present transaction, like the online transaction. But when it is a card present transaction, then it may be difficult for someone who want to fraudulently do a transaction at a particular point of payment, and it goes back to claim a chargeback. That will be difficult. And if the merchant is able to prove, and say this transaction was consummated, because the owners at the end of it all for the chargeback is for the merchant to be able to prove that this transaction was consummated by the card holder. And if he's able to prove that, it goes back to the issuing bank, that's the card issuing a company of the person who used the card and is now claiming for a chargeback. If the issuing bank is satisfied, if he's satisfied with the evidence that has been presented by the merchant, then the provisional credit which they have made for the card holder, they will have to reverse it. But when the merchant is not able to prove that this person was present and did the transaction, that is when the problem lies. The merchant has to bear the pain, because in the first place, if it is good or services, you have already they already parted with your good, you have rendered the service, and now the fund which you were paid from the issuing bank of the card that was used on your platform is now being reversed back to the issuing bank. So the person who is the merchant now is the one who this onus is on to prove that this transaction happened. And so I want to say that for Nigerians, especially for the merchant, because I feel I sincerely sympathize with them, for those of them who are losing money or losing their business because of this. We are in a modern world where technology can help us to solve some of these things. I know that yes, there are some of these businesses that are small businesses, and when I mention technology, they may feel that we are not able to install technology. It will not be too expensive for you, no matter how small your business is, to install a camera at the point of payment of your business, because those are some of the evidences that you can present if a chargeback comes to you to say this customer did this transaction. And I'm also, the way it is going now, I also have the feeling that there may be some persons who have capitalized on the let me say, that technology not being available in Nigeria in some business to be able to track that they actually consummated this transaction. Some person will be capitalizing on that now, and they are using it to do transaction which was a genuine transaction, and when they get back to their country, they began to charge ask for chargeback. Again, I also ask that the Nigeria bank should please stand up for their customer. I want to give you an instance. When I was in Nigeria, then I was somewhere in Asokoro with the bank I was working with, and a very elderly woman called me and said he has been contacted that he won a federal government grant in millions, but that the persons who contacted her have asked her to pay that she has to pay the tax. She has to pay tax to federal government upfront before the money will be released to her. She contacted me, and when she contacted me, immediately I know this was fraud, and I have to play along with the people who contacted her, and they gave me the account number. They gave me the name of their account, and this was an account in a bank in Nigeria. And I contacted that bank, and I tell you, the bank did nothing. And that is why I'm saying that the Nigeria bank should also stand up for their customer. Because if the fund that would be lost, will be directly attributed to the income of that bank, the bank will stand up for it. But of course, what is happening now, what I see happening is that because some of these customers do not know their right, they do not have information on how to channel or pursue this, the banks are aware that they don't know, and when those chargebacks come, they push it directly to those merchants, the business owners. And again, because they know that most of them do not have like evidence to show or to prove, to justify that this transaction actually happened here. And so, like the case I mentioned about the bank, the elderly woman, you can see that I would have expected that when I contacted the bank, even though the bank was going to do something behind it, would give me assurance that they were going to do something. But the bank clearly told me that they can't do anything. And imagine if that transaction was successful, they will continue to do it to other people. When such a call comes to the bank, I expect the bank to take their customer serious, and also see how to protect their customer. Because it is only when the loss will be directly impact the bank's income, that is when you see banks stand up to fight for customer. But when they can push it to the customer, they just leave it to the customer.
Well, it's a really sad situation. Two things. I mean, that was not the ending I was expecting to the story you were telling about your customer and how you tried to stand up for her. I was hoping that the ending would have been different, especially with the response from the other bank. But sadly, that was not the situation. And, you know, it does appear that Nigerian businesses are operating from an already disadvantaged end. You know, this reputation we seem to have with fraud cases, it subsided one time, but it does appear that it is back again, especially with the onslaught now we have with on Yahoo boys. So I'm wondering, you know, how do you think that, do you see a role for government here? Because if this is the situation where small businesses, it was just the other day, the former governor of Lagos and minister was talking about how, you know, every Nigerian would have to get on board if the next December is going to be successful. People will need to maybe get ready to vacate their homes and go to the village, etc., so we can make an extra income. Now, if that is the situation where small businesses just running a little Airbnb here and there, you know, get involved in this sort of thing, what can they put in place apart from technology, and some people will argue that, oh, if you put cameras in your homes, that could be invasive. Some people could argue that that's an invasion of privacy. So looking at that, what else can be done? Do you see a role here for government?
Of course, there's a role for government, because sometimes when we are having a public discussion like this about the things that are happening in our country, I often hear people say, for instance, let me just give you an instance. I was watching a video of a campaign recently somewhere in the north, and this campaign through was passing through like that, a lot kind of a market, and everywhere was littered with a debt. And somebody challenged the politician who were campaigning to say, look at the road where you are campaigning, look at how the road looks. And a lot of people who are making comments were saying, is it the politician who did not keep the road tidy? And my comment to them was that, yes, it is not the politician who did not keep the road tidy. It most definitely it will be the traders around that place that make that road untidy. But if the government itself, that is why we have a government that put things in place. If the government itself sees it and they do nothing to enforce tidiness, those things continue to happen. So in this case of Detty December, government have a role. I can tell you, for instance, in the UK, sometime in September, I think September 2023, the financial card processing regulator came up with a regulation, because it was also happening in the UK. I can confirm to you, I've had a experience where I was to buy something on the Facebook market, and because this transaction was happening on a Tuesday, and I told the person I will not be able to come and see the what I was buying until on Saturday, and the person said I need to make a deposit. I need to make a deposit so that what I wanted to buy, they can keep it until the Saturday when I'll be able to come and check it. And shortly after I made that deposit, the person blocked me. And then it was done on me that it was fraud. And immediately, because you gave me an account number to credit, and the bank told me the body for card payment instituted a regulation where the responsibility is on the bank. The responsibility is on the financial payment, the card issuing a company to bear, and not for the customer, not for the card holder. So in this instance, the regulatory body in Nigeria need to stand up. They need to stand up and put regulation in place such that people are protected. Because if you look at it, the story is not good for us. Because if you look at what is happening, the reason why some of these chargebacks are successful, it is the image about the country which is already painted abroad. You mentioned the issue of Yahoo and the rest of them. And so when these chargebacks are coming and the person says, I didn't do the transaction, the issuing bank are quick to believe their story. Yes, there may be some genuine transaction of people coming back to say, I didn't do this transaction. But if it is a card present transaction, it is difficult for you to claim and say that you did not do this transaction. If they are online transactions, those may be difficult. It may be difficult for you to claim the merchant. It may be difficult for the merchant to prove that yes, this person was present. But where it is a card presented transaction, it is difficult for the card holder to say I was not.
Mr. Joshua, there's an angle to this that you and Malkwe have spoken about, but I'd like to harp on it a little more strongly. And that's the fact that most of the transactions we're talking about were initiated by Nigerians. A good number of the people are Nigerians. And going back to their bases to make declarations about this chargeback, what do you make of that? Particularly in the light of what you just said now about Nigeria's image. This is something by Nigerians done in Nigeria, and then they go back. We've seen, as Malkwe highlighted, people crying, small business crying on social media, saying, look, this is unfair. It could crash their businesses. So these chargebacks are initiated by Nigerians for transactions they made in Nigeria. So what do you make of that?
Okay, again, I would say that, like I said earlier, that some of these transactions chargeback are genuine. But of course, from the stories I have read, a complaint I've heard from people, especially from the business people who are claiming that this transaction was done and these persons are coming back, then I strongly believe that there are some, maybe like a gang, fraudsters who are doing this, who are capitalizing on the vulnerability of this, especially the businesses in Nigeria who do not have either the knowledge on how to pursue this. Because let me tell you something, that in chargeback, where you are not satisfied, there's an arbitration where you can still go to the card.
Mr. Jofo, what I'm actually looking at is the image that you spoke to earlier. Something being done by Nigerians for things they did in Nigeria and return to their base to make those claims in foreign banks. How does that rub off on the entire conversation going forward, for Nigeria in particular as a nation?
Yes, of course. If you look at it, just like you said, most of these card transactions, let's assume the transactions done by Nigeria. There are some Nigerians who may have a fraudulent intent when they do the transaction, because they are capitalizing on the vulnerability of the business people in Nigeria, that when they go back, and because of the image that has been painted about the country, that when they go back and make this claim, that they will get back their money. And if they make it the first time and they get back their money, then they will continue to do that.
Okay, so where do we go from here, particularly as Nigerians, living in different parts of the world? I'm sure some of them are watching this program right now. Some of them will hear of these things, and they'll get into corners and they'll be talking, I did this to them, I did that to them, just to show whatever. So do you see a situation where the Nigerians here will have a better case? Do you see these reversals being reversed when eventually, maybe there is no investigation at all on the part of the Nigerians?
Again, that is something I cannot confirm here, because like I said when I was speaking to Mokwe, most of the time the Nigeria bank don't stand up for their customer, because if the impact is not going to be on the bank income, then they push these things to the merchant. It's not left for the merchant to understand how to pursue it to get their money back. There are investigations, and if the bank actually stands up for the business owners, and especially if the business owner is able to present evidence and say this transaction are genuine, this person was present and the person that did the transaction here, then that the bank can actually help them. Because let me tell you something, the transaction, the settlement system, the cash settlement system, the merchant is not involved in it. The merchant does not know what is going on. All the merchant sees is a credit or debit in this account. But the bank, the financial institution, is involved in it. And to answer the question which you asked earlier, is there anything government can do? Yes, the financial institution, the regulatory body, should be able to do something to protect this merchant. I don't know. I left the banking system 8 years ago. I don't know if the card system in Nigeria has a limit for such a transaction. Here in the UK, card transaction has a limit, daily limit, so that when you are exceeding those limits, the bank is alerted and the bank will contact you to ask if you are the one initiating this transaction. And so also, when you are also doing a transaction, right there, if you are doing a transaction in a Nigeria and the bank is alerted, if the bank is alerted, they will get, sometimes they block the card and find out from you if you are the one doing this transaction. So I don't know if the Nigeria regulatory system, the financial system there, the bank, if there are such a regulation in place to also help their own customer, because the merchants who are the business people here are their own customer. And if the business they are doing, card payment becomes an issue, because world over today, large transaction pass through card payment, because we are talking about a cashless society. So if a card transaction are passing through, if large transactions are passing through card payment, then the bank should also have in place things to help the small businesses, especially the small businesses, because some large businesses in Nigeria may have the capacity to be able to present or even pursue their cases. Because sometimes even the small bank, even the small business owners, even when they have evidences, the cost of pursuing the chargeback may even outweigh what they are pursuing, and they just ignore it. And these people keep doing these transactions.
Well, I sincerely hope that, you know, for those small businesses that are watching this conversation, they start to, or potential businesses, they start to put safeguards in place for things like this. And we also hope that the disputes are resolved amicably. That this is something that the regulator of our banking system here would also look at and see how small businesses in particular can be protected. But thank you so much for speaking with us this morning, Mr. Richard Ejiofor. He is the CEO of Mr. Roll Group United Kingdom Limited. He's an HR specialist and also a former bank card business manager who is currently a UK student recruitment consultant. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Indeed, we have a few feedback for you.